The alarm's going off, man. Stop hitting snooze. I need you. If you're looking to feel like warm and fuzzy inside, like I'm your guy. So they're in my top 20 EHL teams for sure. There's emotion, there's hatred. This is not like a very friendly series. It's like SpongeBob when he's got like the napkin and like the potato chip. Like that's how I feel. Listen, Colson, I didn't have fun. Everything in my body hurts right now. The team that has the lead in the second period is just not going to win that game. There's no need for air quotes. He's tardy all the time. It's the American thing to do. I was alive, just not very. No, don't get pucks deep. Hang on to the puck. Pass the puck. Shoot the puck. Are we live? Are we live? We're having a good time. JKP, baby. JKP.
Welcome back into another episode of our EHL Coaches Edition Summer Podcast. It is deep into the offseason now, and we have Applecore General Manager and Head Coach Conall McNelis here with us. Coach Conall, thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me here, Jake. Looking forward to the season.
Absolutely, and it was your first as head coach and GM at the EHL level. You've been an assistant at the EHL level, head coach at the Premier, where you won a couple of rings with both teams. So now looking back, how important were those years in preparing you for this season?
Yeah, super important, right? Super important. I was lucky enough to be a part of a few there, and obviously the 87s threw a few more on top of that this year. So shout out, congrats to them. But yeah, I mean, super important. Coming from an environment like that, the kind of the mentorship, a little bit of Adam Houli and Matt Kiernan and everybody over there was fantastic. And look, obviously, certainly helped me get ready. I mean, last season was certainly tough and an adjustment. I always tell guys came from certainly a bit more of a winning atmosphere, but I think honestly prepared me for that even more so in that sense. Just from a just kind of how to hold yourself accountable and just kind of the way it's kind of done there. I think it was massive for me. And will always be, I think, a real leaping frog for me in my coaching career, being with the 87s, then, being within the league to make that jump to the Applecore will always be something I'm like very proud of.
I love that, man. And I know you mentioned Adam Houli in that answer. So just, obviously he's been one of the most successful coaches in the EHL level, now moving up to the NAHL. So how much were you able to absorb in your time with him? And are there any things, because, hockey's a copycat industry that you to the Applecore?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Houli's, no other way to say it, a mentor, someone I look up to a ton. And thankfully I could say a friend as well. Learned so much from him. I mean this like the best, the way he could adjust a drill into a practice and make it more game situational. He's as good as I've ever seen with that. But a massive mentor. I've known Houli a long time. He actually coached my brother once upon a time. And so, to be able to build that relationship over the years, I always tell everybody, my relationship with the EHL really started when I was at, Newman and like watching the little Flyers every day because they're at the same rink. And that eventually, kind of rekindled me and Houli a little bit and kind of reminded him who I was, being Kieran's big brother. But no, Houli is, I was so happy for him. It's so well deserved. What a coach, what a person, truly, and someone who believes in the league, I think is super important as well. So I tried to absorb as much as I can, but also to make sure to humble him once in a while when I needed to. But I love the guy and couldn't be more happy for him. Hopefully, frankly, I feel like now I can maybe even bug him a little bit more now that we're not rivals in the same league. Maybe steal a few more practice plans from him and things like that. So
I love that, man. And looking back on when you were announced as head coach and GM of the Applecore, it was already 2 months into the off season last year. So that obviously must have been a hectic time. So how much was it, and is it more of a relief now, obviously getting to dig in with a full off season here?
Oh, 1,000%. Definitely was kind of chaotic last summer and into the fall. I'll be really honest. It was a lot. Definitely a big growing period for me from life and hockey wise as well. But no, it's been massive from the start, just from the recruiting standpoint, being out on the road, running into some guys all over the place with obviously the EHL showcase, but everywhere it seems like. But it's been huge to have that, just to kind of dive into it a little bit. It definitely was a little bit of chaos last summer into the fall. But no, it's been great to kind of have that and start to, put the pieces pieces together here all off season. It's been fun. Honestly, it's a fun part of the job as far as talking to people from all different backgrounds. I guess a little bit that makes it entertaining for me sometimes. But no, it's been really good. Definitely nice to have that time frame. And look, that's something that even with our owner Steve, like I mentioned last year, is like, hey, having a whole off season, like a difference that would make, and certainly eager to get back to it now, especially being a little bit more settled, kind of knowing where I'm going back to is always a good feeling, really, for anybody going into the off season.
Yeah, and we're looking forward to it as well. We're going to get into some of the guys in a little bit, but from a personal standpoint, obviously your first time at the EHL level with a GM role and head coach role attached to it. So dealing with bigger roster sizes than the premier, college commitments, and anything else that may come up with the GM role, was there more pressure on you, did you feel, throughout the season?
I mean, definitely, it's a bigger role. It's a bigger responsibility. I think that just kind of comes with the position. I think pressure comes in all different shapes and forms, but at the same time, there's just expectations there, and trying to meet them to the best of my ability is kind of the goal. And look, I always tell this to people, coming from an organization like in New Jersey, winning is great and all that stuff, but I think it's a byproduct, especially with what the league is trying to push, for as far as player promotion and all that kind of stuff. So it's that balance, right? Of like, yes, winning and pushing that envelope, but also, hey, we're trying to make better hockey players. We're trying to make better men here. That's the ultimate goal. And so sometimes there's that balance of reminding yourself of that, in certain situations, right? And having your teaching cap on, your coaching cap on when is needed. And sometimes I think a little bit more, just kind of a friendly voice to talk to if it's needed as well. I think there's that balance with today's athlete. I think that I try to work with, and so it's a balance of that, obviously, like that pressure, like you said, but at the same time, understanding, what that pressure means, why is there pressure, right? And then, always try to have those kind of thoughts. So it's a long-winded answer saying yes, but I think it kind of comes in different varieties at different moments.
So what do you think, helped you in kind of finding or striking the balance between, the player on the ice and then the character of the person too?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. I think, I really try to separate that. Anybody who's seen me coach, anybody who's been on the ice with me at practice, I have no problem talking. So I'm a pretty loud individual. So, being on the ice with the coach and putting that on, to me, I'll give a shout out to Tony Namati. Shout out wherever Coach Tony is right now. Coach that I had when I was growing up, and he always kind of talked about that, like the intensity on the ice, but being able to be a man off the ice. Like that was something he like really instilled with me. He's like, hey, you be as pissed off as you want. Like you're not gonna be rude to your parents when you walk off the ice. Like all that kind of stuff, and like that always really resonated with me. So like holding yourself accountable, and sometimes that's saying nothing. Sometimes it's just like, hey, I'm hot right now. Let's get out of the room and let's breathe for a second. Or even had a player this year with a scratch ass. I said, hey, let's talk in 24 hours. No big deal. And circle back with that kind of stuff. I think having that separation helps me in that sense, and being able to, try your best to hold yourself to that standard. And I'm a big believer in, if I'm not going to do it, how could I tell one of my players to do it? So that's something I really try to focus on as I get older here. And I'm on the bench, and I have a tendency to kind of talk to myself a little bit and maybe talk out loud, but, really working on body language and how I'm acting around these kids. I think, we're always influencing them. And I think that's something I try to really make a note of when you talk about separating that coaching. I could be as intense as I need to be in the world when I'm coaching, but being able to kind of have that separation if there's something that needs to be discussed, I think is vital. I think it's vital for any coach. And I think today with the modern athlete, as we know more from the mental side of it, which is a good thing, we have to be more cognizant of that.
Wow, that was an awesome answer, Coach.
Yeah, no worries. I love talking about that. Love that.
Yeah,
I think it's very fascinating. So I always make this joke. I always say if I knew I was really going to be a coach, I should have got a psychology degree. So
yeah,
that's what I should have gotten at the end of the day.
Players probably feel that same way.
Yeah. Seriously, that's what I feel like.
I had a player say to me that we should probably get a league psychologist. So there you go.
Honestly, it's not the worst idea in the world. I think it's great. Mental health, good stuff.
Absolutely. And on the ice, systems-wise, identity-wise, how was it implementing your style, and are any things that you noticed worked or didn't work in your first year that you're carrying with you?
Good question. I think a little bit of adjusting to the roster. I think as you get older, you have to do a little bit more with older levels. You have to do that a little bit more. I think, when I was at the Premier for a couple of years, if you had the talent, you can kind of kind of do, I don't want to say do what you want, but you definitely had a little bit more leeway there. But, kind of reminds me of like being back in college where like, hey, like depending on the team, like you have to maybe play it a little bit differently. But no, 100%. I mean, look, we changed our forecheck mid-year, which super helped with us. Shout out Joe Masunias who gave us that recommendation. And I think for me, goes back to that, being open to adjustments. That's what I've learned, I think, quickly last year. Had a few things in place and I was like, I don't know if this is working. And that goes back to dialogue with players. I'm very willing to have those conversations with players about, what's going to work for them. What do you need to find success? I think that's a question I ask them. What do you feel you need? But I think that's the biggest thing for me, was being open to, okay, we adjustments here and trusting the fact that, hey, it's not going to happen overnight. But going again back to that process, finding a way to really use the right words to explain kind of what we're looking for. But definitely, I mean, I think from the strategic standpoint, just being able to make more adjustments, I think that's the biggest thing. You have to a little bit quicker. I think that was a big learning point for me in that sense of, hey, it's got to be a quicker reaction. You don't have that maybe leeway that at lower levels, okay, they'll kind of build up into it. It's like, hey, you got to make it quick. It's like a pitcher in the playoffs. If they ain't going, get the bullpen up. And I think that's what I think was my biggest learning lesson of this past year from a strategic standpoint.
And when you're dealing with younger guys, I'm sure that makes that even, more of a situation. So, I mean, you had one of the youngest EHL teams in the league. So how was it, getting those guys accustomed to, a fast and heavy league like the EHL?
Yeah. I just think, sometimes you got to throw your jump right into the pool, I guess, throw yourself right into it and see how she goes. I think that was definitely a learning curve for some guys, and even guys, at the start of last year who, were making that jump. And, I think it's honestly, a tribute to our league. I think a lot of guys will come into the league and just not quite sure and realize how good, how big, how fast it is. Right. So, for me, learning with the younger guys, that goes back to, what we're talking about before, about just having that communication, right? And talking to them. A question I ask a lot of guys is, if I see something on the ice that I don't like, I might let them know about it, but I'd be like, what did you see? What are you thinking? And, sometimes the answers are different. Sometimes the answers absolutely baffle me. Other times I'm like, okay, maybe I didn't think about it that way. So I think that's the biggest thing is trying to help them cope with that. Just like a young coach like myself would cope with it. I try to remind them that is like, hey, I've been through this a little bit, but at the same time, we're in this together. And, you have to tell me what I could do to help you a little bit sometimes. I'm big on communication. So like, if you don't ask for the help, sometimes it's tough to get it. And I'm guilty of that too. Not asking for the help when I need it maybe, but that was my biggest point of emphasis with those, especially some of the younger guys is, look, I think for me, I had to simplify a little bit. I had to put on a younger coaching cap a little bit within the sense of, hey, these guys, just don't have that experience or need some more fine tuning than maybe normally in the past I didn't have to do. I think that's the biggest part of coaching is seeing what you have in front of you and making those adjustments and finding a way to make that work. Because at the end of the day, whether you're winning a million games or losing a million games, like you have to find a way to keep trying to step forward. And I think with guys like that, from the mental side of it, and obviously some of the struggles we had last year, I give a lot of credit to the team in that aspect. I always tell guys it probably could have been a lot worse with the attitudes and stuff, and it never was. And I thought that's a big kudos to those guys. And I saw a lot of maturity as the year went along. I thought early in the year, some immaturity for sure, immaturity. But as the year went along and we got through it, you could see guys growing and understanding a little bit there. So that's the biggest thing for me with the younger guys is communication. If you can't talk to them, they're never going to learn, and they're probably not going to want to learn too, right? If they don't have that kind of voice. So that's my biggest point of emphasis there.
So do you think that communication thing was the biggest reason why you guys were able to, maybe grow character-wise, grow maturity-wise as the year went on?
Yeah, I do. I do. I mean, I think just kind of talking and I did. They were a great group of kids. Like I enjoyed, I enjoyed their company in that sense of like, hey, they like each other. That's a good thing. I think that's the biggest thing. But absolutely, I think for me, that's always been thankfully a strong suit for me as far as communication. I was that way as a player. That way, frankly, as a person. So, that's so big. And I think these guys just need that. They need to hear it, and be corrected when they need to be corrected. They're there. They're hockey players. They want to get better, but also learning on your own a little bit too, and reminding them, hey, you are going to have to screw up a few times to get it right, but it's part of my job to get it right. I'd rather a guy fail fantastically, and me come in and try to clean that up than, not give an effort at all. I always tell guys, I can't fix that. I can't start your motor. If you got a motor going, I could fix it. So let's kind of push it that way.
Yeah. And as far as some of the individual guys go, just talking about younger players, Paulis Leonards Paegle, obviously an '06 defenseman who was an all-star, played for the Mid-Atlantic team at the All-Star College Series. What enabled him to be, an impact player at an event like that, despite being a young guy for this league?
Attitude. Paulis' attitude. I mean, intense. I think talk about a guy who matured a lot over the year. He's a grinder. I mean, that kid, has been on his own for a bit now, working his way up the hockey rankings. Everything for him is from a work ethic standpoint. I mean, he's got a ton of skill, but I love him from that sense. And he's a fiery competitor. I mean, he's a fiery competitor. I love his attitude on the bench. Honestly, truly mean this. One of my favorite players I ever got to coach in that sense, just from a fire standpoint, and and for him to be an all-star and kind of keep going up here. I think sky's the limit for him. I really do. Awesome kid, awesome person. And for him, I just think it's that fire and that drive that, if that rubs off on some other guys, I mean, who knows where that goes, right? So, for him, it's just, kind of keeping a cool head. I think he's the first to admit, just like myself once upon a time, to get a little fiery. But I think as long as he's keeping his head, man, I mean, you saw the work rate, obviously the point totals, but, the block shots, the amount of minutes, all situations, that guy's, he's a stud. He really is. And then he's going to be eventually a great college hockey player here. But to come in at his age and be that kind of guy for us, can't say enough good things about Paulis. He's an awesome kid, and really excited for his future here.
Yeah, agree completely. One of my favorite interviewees.
He's a great interview. He's a funny kid, man. He can talk about someone who could talk.
Yeah,
he loves it.
Great
he's
personality.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Awesome kid.
And, another guy who had a good year, '05, Braedon Gallante, was nearly a point per game. And now, you expect him to return for an age out year here. So, what forward steps do you expect him to take, with this upcoming season?
Yeah, another guy, just an absolute workhorse. From the get-go, like really never a question on what he's going to be able to accomplish here. Look, for him, it's kind of more of the same, if not more. I think he's another guy who hopefully will gain some significant interest come the fall, and he deserves it. But another guy too who, like, just, maybe a little bit different from a vocal standpoint than Paulis, who's a little bit more vocal, but just works through contact. He's got a little edge to his game, which I love. And another guy who could do all situations. I think earlier in the year, defensively, that was something we really worked on, just a little bit more, probably rightfully so. Got away with some things at younger levels, given his skill and speed. That happens with every youth player, right? But I think once he bought into that, and look, I mean, lethal. Several shorthanded goals. I know he wasn't much of a PK, I think, in the past, and used his speed in that sense to make some jumps. I know you're an Isles fan. He was good on the Rangers too, but a little Michael Grabner there, jumping up and stealing some pucks and getting some breakaways. So there was a few goals like that this year, reminded me of Grabner. So he's a guy, again, attitude. He's going to make it because of his attitude. Again, like, obviously with the struggles last year, that's a guy who, I'm sorry, he could have been, sour about everything, and wasn't. Just continued to work, put up the numbers, was a leader. I expect him to be a leader this year. And another guy who just has the right attitude. I think another guy who just gets it from that standpoint, and he's a pro. Gally's a pro. A guy I never had to worry about getting him going. Yeah, that was never a concern for me. And as a coach, you really appreciate that.
Yeah, I love that. And, you mentioned leadership, and you can't talk about leadership without Tyler Gobel, your captain. from this past season, climbed the ranks in this league, now committed to WestCon. So you coached against him in the EHLP 2 years ago, had a good development year last year at the EHL, and now this year, obviously, he took off, had that great, hat trick in his last
Yeah, I
year,
know. What a finish.
which was
That was the
perfect. So,
best.
how was it for you seeing him come along this far from having, watched him play against you as a P player?
Gobel, I don't know what I could say about Gobel that hasn't already been said. I think he's like a league legend at this point. Truly, I genuinely mean this. One of the best human beings I've ever met. Most importantly, just attitude wise, I could say this now retroactively. Shout out to a couple of my boys on my 22-23 team. Even Tyler Branish, who just won another one there, wanted to trade for Gobel that year when we won a chip with the P because we loved him so much. But honestly, it was a privilege to coach Tyler. I mean that. Just his standards, his attitude, talk about, I think a guy like Braedon, probably really learned a lot from Tyler this past year. And just kind of his attitude towards everything. And I mean, he has worked for everything he's had. There's never a complaint. There's never not a smile. And a guy who, I hopefully will have a relationship with, for going forward here through my life. I think he deserves that. I mean, when the WestCon stuff happened, for him to stay that close, I was so pumped, for next year, for this season coming up, I should say now, to hopefully get a chance to see him a decent amount. Just from an attitude, a work ethic standpoint, Tyler's earned everything he's gotten, and I give him so much credit. Just for his attitude, what he brought to the table every day. I'm going to miss him sorely. And that's a guy who I believe told him, I said he's got an assistant job waiting for him whenever he wants it when he's done playing. So from a leadership standpoint, he was exceptional, but from a human being standpoint, I mean, that is where I'll miss him most, to be completely honest. Despite all his on-ice success, just having him around was so good for that group as a younger group who had its struggles and whatnot. A guy like him, and his teammate Liam Lane and stuff like that. I think those guys were just so massive for us last year. And Gobel truly, just an absolute privilege to be able to coach him and watch him grow through the league from afar, and then to be able to do it kind of on a daily basis, right? I think is super fun to really, hey, I like that player, I love the way he plays, and then to get to know the person, and you're like, wow, somehow this is better than the player. That was a really fun experience for me.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And league legend is the perfect.
He is, man.
comment.
How could he not be? Hey,
Yeah.
he's an absolute league legend.
He's a league legend for sure. And, joining him, like you said, Liam Lane at WestCon, your goaltender who, had a pretty heavy workload this past season. Just how is his attitude in terms of handling all that? And obviously, there's a lot of pressure on his shoulders as a goaltender.
Yeah, I mean, Liam came in, when I talked to Liam last summer, I was pretty shocked he wasn't signed anywhere, but he wanted EHL. He was a USPHL All-Star, had a great success there. And look, I mean, obviously, given our situation where we were at, I mean, he became the guy, right? All-time, single season saves leader, all that kind of stuff. So, another guy who never changed, fiery guy, a little bit more quiet maybe on a daily basis, but at the same time, just that quiet presence in the net, a tremendous leader. And, for him to get the opportunity, especially, as a goalie, which it can just be tougher. I tell guys with goalies, there's just less spots, right? There's no other way to say that. There's just less homes. And for him to kind of lock down that WestCon, him and Gobel, turning into buddies pretty quickly. And I believe they're living together next year. I know they did a little roadie this year and stuff like that too. Honestly, that's the best feeling is when you see that happen. But to me with Liam, it never really in question. Again, he gave us an opportunity every single night, and from a goaltending perspective, that's all you want, right? You want a guy who's gonna give you that opportunity, and if you could seize it, great. And if you don't, that's how hockey works, right? That's sometimes it just doesn't bounce your way. But Liam was absolutely fantastic in net. Another kid, I got to see him when I was out in Colorado in May, just kind of catching up and chatting with him. Just again, attitude is everything with him. And I think is going to have a really good college career as well. He's just so calm, doesn't lose it back there. For his ability to kind of stick with it, I think is from a mental fortitude is exactly what you need as a goaltender. And hopefully he's going to have a chance to play some big minutes and contribute right away at WestCon. I think it's going to be a great fit for him.
Yeah, I do too, especially a new program like that.
Exactly.
Jump in, take
Exactly.
the reins, and all while wearing the sickest pads probably in D3
I
hockey.
love his pads, man. I loved it. I had my old goalie Chet Tucker. Shout out Chet. He saw his pads one time. He loved it. He was
Yeah,
like,
those
that's it, man. Those are the best. That's it.
And you're bringing up obviously a handful of guys from the Union Junior Thunder Premier
Yeah,
squad, which obviously is the goal of the EHL Premier.
exactly.
The guy who coached in the Premier before. What do you look for in those guys to know that they're ready for the jump, especially being in a different building than them?
Yeah, no, for sure. Look, I mean, shout out to Union. Sam, Lucas, those guys have just been exceptional this year. Sam Taffel is turned into somebody I really lean on in those situations and is just does such a good job with that. Another guy who just has such the right mindset as far as development. We work very closely. We talk pretty consistently about what needs and everything like that. And look, bringing a few guys up there. Obviously, DJ got a chance to stick with us throughout the year last year, and having a few more guys to add to that. I just think one, as you said, that's the point of the league. That's the goal. Goes back to me saying, hey, yes, winning, all that great stuff, but the pushing players along, P to EHL, EHL to NCAA. I mean, we just talked about Tyler Gobel, the perfect example of a guy who put in that work and worked his way up. And I think that's something that I want to show as a reward to those guys. Hey, you're going to put that work in. I'm going to, I want to give you that opportunity, because that's what we're looking for. We're looking for guys who want to seize that opportunity and get hungry. And as far as what I'm looking for from a skill standpoint and everything like that, I mean, everyone's going to be a little bit different there. Mate Fargas, who we're bringing in, a little bit more speed and some physicality up front. I really like his kind of two-way game, that I got a chance to see in person, and obviously watching a lot of tape on him. Him from an attitude and speed perspective, I think will help us a ton, especially with what we want to potentially do on the forecheck. And then, some other guys, right? Tomas on the back end there, just a stable defenseman, great size. He's got a little edge to his game. We got to rein him back a little bit. But I don't mind that. I'd rather a guy I got to pull back than try to get him to go and push it, right? I'd rather a guy, hey, I need you to take 10% off that a little bit than, hey, I need you to give 50% more, right? So, when we're looking at those things, I think it's about fit. I think it's about, situations. Yeah, I also don't want to throw them to the fire. I don't want to be like, hey, you're going to be playing 20 minutes a night. Let's go. Let's do it. It's about, hey, that buildup. You saw that over the year with some of our young guys this past year, right? Hey, this is a process. And I think guys who understand its process, I have a much better chance of making it, because you can't, I always say this to guys. I love shooting for the moon. Like, I love it. You should have big goals, go for it. But if you don't have little goals along the way for the ladder of success, you're not going to get there. Because you have to give yourself little rewards along the way. That's just how we are as human beings. And that's my biggest thing. So with those guys, watch them on a daily basis, putting in the work, at the E, at the P, and starting to steadily climb that ladder. I think that's kind of, the goal there for us. And those guys are going to be great.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Got to get to point A before you get to point B.
Exactly.
And you said some of the new guys you're bringing in are hungry, have a chip on their shoulders. So, what makes you say that? And obviously, what kind of, how much do you think that will add character to this group?
It's something I've been looking for all season. All off season here is coming after last year, all that kind of stuff. That's something that I emphasize, and talking to a few guys who I'm bringing in. I was very, hey, what's your off season? What have you been up to? What happened last season? A few guys who, I think compared to others, maybe didn't even have always the strongest season, or just different situations. I have one guy, Thomas Hickey, who, kind of bounced around a little bit in the USPHL, wound up finding a home, becoming a point per game guy there. When I talked to him on the phone and some other guys, that was a question I asked. I said, are you hungry? Like, what are you looking to prove? And, wanting to make the jump, obviously, with us going tier 2, but also, just that attitude. I think it need a little bit more sandpaper there, and that's kind of what I'm looking for. I thought we at times lacked that last year, and it cost us in certain situations. So wanting guys who want something to prove, wanting guys who are hungry, I think that meshes with my personality and coaching, and I think those are the kind of guys that I want to have here, who are going to play with a little bit of passion. I love that. I love look, I don't mind a goal celebration. You're pumped up. heck yeah, let's get a fist pump. Let's go. Like, I love that stuff. I think emotion's part of it. And so I want guys who have that fire. And then, from a guy who, in my opinion, had that as well, from an emotional standpoint, then finding that balance of, hey, there's, you got to use your head a little bit here too, and working with those guys. So I think my personality gels with those kind of players. But also at the same time, I think that's what you need. You need guys ready to be hungry. And we see it every year at the EHL level, right? It's about finding that tempo, finding that timing of getting hot at the right time, but also, that balance of skill, yes, but also that, that work rate and stuff. That's what we're really looking for. So, definitely hunger, drive, chip on the shoulder, that kind of stuff has been, I think, a part of every conversation, that I've had with anybody I've talked to from a recruiting standpoint this offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm sure that this, that's a big part of this. My last question for you is that, given your coaching experience, at Newman at the D3 level, knowing what they're looking for, and obviously this past season with the EHL, how can you use that to kind of recruit and develop guys that college coaches are specifically looking for?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I think it's definitely always in my mind, right? It's like, I remind guys, like, hey, this is the goal. Like, you might not necessarily love what I'm selling you right now, but I'm like, this is what the expectation is at the next level. So I try to bring that a bunch. Kyle Mountain, who I worked with at Newman, he was a D1 guy with a lot of pro guys, and that was just, he was big on that, the expectations and what you just should be doing, when the cameras aren't on, right? I think that's a huge part of it. And, I was at Adrian before that with their ACHA program, Gary Estalis, who's just fantastic and everything he does. And I learned that from him, from his intensity and stuff. He's like, look, there's an expectation here when you show up, like, of what what is required and just kind of the standard you hold yourself. So, when I talk about those experiences with my players, which I try to do often to remind them, hey, this is where I was before and why I'm here now. And I've seen what that takes, right, at that level. And we see it, every year when we do the college showcase stuff. And, I always just try to overemphasize that kind of stuff. It's like, hey, if I'm correcting you, and back to like the personal stuff and talking, if I'm correcting you and coaching you, it's because I know what you need to do in order to get there. And at the end of the day, I tell everybody that's great business for all of us, right? If you can get from point A, point A to point B to point C, work up the ladder here. That's always going to be the ultimate goal for us. So, when I talk about my past experiences, at a place like Newman or Adrian, I always try to tell guys that, hey, that's the expectation at the next level, right? And, college season's short, 24 games. I'm like, I know this sounds crazy, but you make a mistake or two, you might get scratched and you might not get back in the lineup. I mean, that's a legitimate possibility, and I think that's only going to get harder with some of the new rules and all that kind of stuff coming down with the Canadian players. So, I remind guys of that. Hey, and the expectations too big there for me is the body language, how you're kind of holding yourself, like all those things are controllable. You could control that stuff, then you could just focus on what you got to do on the ice. Then that stuff becomes background noise. So I think that's my biggest thing. It's just emphasizing, hey, this is a full-time job in most scenarios. So you just got to be ready to kind of hold yourself to that standard.
Definitely, Coach. Well, I do have one last question for you. Do you have any big plans this weekend?
Loaded. I should have known that was coming. Yes, we were recording this on July 18th here. I'm getting married tomorrow, July 19th, 2025. So yes, I have a few plans this weekend that I will be doing. Fingers crossed here down on the Jersey Shore, where I'm at right now. It's been a humid and rainy week, but it's supposed to be really nice tomorrow. So, so fingers crossed on that. So.
Awesome. Well, Coach, thank you so much for your time. Congratulations on this, and we can't wait to see the Apple Corps with year 2 under your leadership. So best of luck with everything.
Thanks, Jake. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to The E Show, presented by the Hockey Podcast Network. Learn more about us at easternhockeyleague.org and follow us on all of your favorite social media platforms. Also, be sure to subscribe and get notified when our next podcast episode is released.